You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Hello and good afternoon if you're listening from inside the Channel Country, and a very good afternoon, good evening, good morning, slumite puggy, slumite mullen, whatever, if you're listening around the world on the podcast.
Yes, hello listeners, I'm Clancy Overall. I'm sitting here in Koala Mattress Studios, as always, with Errol Parker. We've got an iconic guest in the studio with us today for our show, and we're going to get straight into it.
Yes, he's one of the voices, if not the voice of cricket in this country, and I'm sure the vast majority of you listening to us right now have heard one of his famous impressions. We're, of course, talking about the 12th man, comedian, journalist, and, of course, impressionist, Billy Birmingham.
Yes, he's been a staple in Dad's Christmas stocking for nearly 3 decades, a true audio artist, and he's willing to give us a little taste of those voices that he made so famous over the years.
But before we get into that, this podcast this week is brought to you by our friends down south at UTS InSearch.
Yes, it's that time of the year again when many of our country's high school leavers have been given a single mark as a summary of their 13 years of schooling in what we now call an education. And thinking about what's coming up next for themselves.
Yes, that's right. There are some of them down there who haven't had a sip of alcohol yet and think that getting a perfect ATAR will give you a perfect life. Well, guess what? It doesn't.
That's where UTS InSearch comes into the picture. That's another way into university, into the University of Technology in Sydney. They offer all kinds of diploma programs that can get you into a second year of a UTS degree. Perfect for young people who haven't forfeited their teenage years to be defined by their ATAR.
So if you didn't get an ideal ATAR and don't have a job as an editor of a newspaper promised to you by your old man like Clancy did, have a look at what they have got on offer.
UTS InSearch are hosting 2 Q&A webinars both today and tomorrow. You can hear from previous HSC students about how they bounce back from their ATAR, and they might have some tips on how to deal with sticky big relatives like Arnie Maud at Christmas. Check them out at insearch.edu.au for more details.
Yes, if you need it, they've got you covered. So thank you to UTS InSearch for getting behind independent regional media, and let's get into today's show. Sitting
here in the recording studio at Desert Rock FM with a very influential guest to a lot of Australians. He's influential to our newspaper, influential to many, many people who enjoy summer and enjoy the sound of summer. Yourself, Billy Birmingham, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, boys. Nice to be in this part of Australia. I haven't been here for a long time.
It's good that you've made it all the way out here to the edge of the Simpson Desert.
Yeah, well, it's not a place that a lot of people get to often.
No,
and chance to come out here and have a chat with you guys is something I've been looking forward to, and now I've finally made it. I'm here and I'm thirsty.
Beautiful. Well, we've got plenty of Batuta bitter for you.
There you go.
Now, mate,
let me have a sip of some now. You can get it riding. You can get it rooting a cow. Matter of fact, I'm rooting one now. Whoa, Nelly.
Now, we want to talk to you about the career you've had, obviously.
L'homme deuxième.
L'homme deuxième.
That's French for the 12th man. L'homme deuxième.
And how much the status quo has changed from what it used to be in the 70s to the bastardisation of what it's become now.
Yeah. What, cricket, do you mean? The bastardisation?
The commentary.
Or commentary, or... Look, we're here in Batuta, basically when, the news is still fresh out of the oven, that Channel 9 have lost the cricket. And to a lot of people, not even just young people, but, people my age, I'm 65 next month. Fuck, that sounds old, doesn't it? But anyway, a lot of people like me had lost fucking interest in cricket until Kerry Packer got hold of it in, 78 or whatever. And then with Richie Benaud, Tony Gregg, John Cornell's Strop, a lot of people know him as, and Hoax, and a lot of people revolutionised the game. And I don't think I can blow enough smoke up Kerry Packer's arse. Anyone who makes $1 out of cricket in 2018 owes a shitload of gratitude to Kerry Packer and those aforementioned people. But, that was kind of a revolution of the game of cricket. The way the game was presented, with the coloured uniforms and the cameras everywhere. And I always imagine KP saying, this is a fucking gladiatorial fucking sport. You got a bloke hurling a fucking rock down at someone at 100 miles an hour. As goes, it's got fucking steeped in history. Why isn't anyone fucking watching? And, so they've come up with this idea of how they cover the game.
Late night.
Late night, coloured uniforms, lights, and cameras everywhere. And all the naysayers who were freaking out about the 5-day game going to suffer as a result of this 50-over game that, Kerry focused on. They'd played one-day games, but they hadn't focused on it, whereas Packer decided to give sort of equal weight to these one-day games where people would come along, spend the day or the night or the whole series, the whole session rather, and go home with the result. Cricket in all of its forms has flourished ever since.
Do you reckon that had a ripple effect around the world as well?
Oh, absolutely. So the Poms especially were horrified.
Yeah.
That these fucking Antipodean wankers had
colonial back
got hold of their game. What the fuck are they doing in our game? I remember Sir Anthony Hardboiled Egg, I think was his name, the chairman of the fucking MCC. He was like, what the fuck's going on here? And they were really coloured uniforms. What the fuck's going on? Yeah. The creams. And
they're wearing their pyjamas down there.
They're wearing pyjamas and under lights. No. But every form of the game flourished. And as I said, it's continued to do so over the last, when it was 78, what are we doing at 40-something years? And anyone who makes a quid out of the game in 2018 owes a lot to Kerry Packer and those other trailblazers who grabbed the game by the fruff of the scrot or the scruff of the throat, depending on what school you went to, and gave it the re-presentation, the re-energising that it needed. Because it
had a similar effect as, say, State of Origin football did on rugby league, where they kind of just amped it up to that kind of explosive world wrestling level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. State against state, mate against mate, and all that sort of thing. And poor old Darryl Eastlake was one of my favourite voices to do. And he died recently. They're all fucking carking it.
Do you stop?
I'm getting phone calls from people saying, can you fucking re-edit your record and take me off it? Because everyone who you've taken a piss out of is dying. Tony Gregg, fucking Max Walker, Richie Benaud, Darryl Eastlake, Mike Gibson. They're all, no. Oh, fuck, get me off those fucking records. Bill Orrie's particularly worried. Fuck me.
Do you stop doing them once they die?
Well, I kind of have to. I mean, I did a posthumous. I mean, Richie Benaud. I did a greatest hits. Like the best of Richie. Yeah. I did a greatest hits general record, which was called Willy Nilly, and then when Richie carked it a few years later, I decided. I mean, the guy's been the backbone of every record I've done. He's been there. Even when I did a Wide World of Sports record, I managed to shoehorn Richie in there, typical stinking fucking hot day here in Bombay, and all that. I always had a cross to him somewhere in the world. And he was the mainstay, the backbone. He was where I started. It was his voice that got me into the whole 12-man thing back in the early 80s. I think I had him calling down from heaven for some radio sketch that I did. Put the the choral orchestra in the background going with some sort of harp trill. Check 1 2 and a bit of echo in his voice. And Kerry, I'll be there in a sec. What the fuck? We're having a game of poker here, Benno. Where are you? It won't be a sec. Just on the phone to Australia. And so I think I've done him from heaven. A lot of people have been. All the Facebook people have been saying to me, Billy, now they're all dead, maybe it's time to have a game in heaven, where you get Max Walker and Tony Gregg and Richie commentating.
Hansi Cronje.
Hansi Cronje, that's right, yes. I left 50 on the nose, Australia. Hansi, he denied that plane was fixed.
Watch out for that mountain, boy.
Yes, we're going in for a closer look now. Oh, fuck. Hansi Cronje, but I've had such a good run with the whole 12th man thing. Yeah. It's a pity it has to come to an end, but it's like, all good things, it has come to an end. If I was to do another one now, I don't really feel the passion to do another one. Yeah.
Could you do a warning? Is there a warning?
No, there's no. That's what I'm doing. If you wanted to look at the current crop of commentators on Channel 9, since Richie passed away, so the last 3 years, Slats and Heels and Brett Lee and
Mark.
And which Mark have you got? With the
Mark Nicholas.
Oh, Mark Nicholas, yes. Well, you've done Mark with the South African voice. That's why you threw me out of gear there. Yeah, I can't work out who he's doing there. Mark Nicholas. There's none of those guys have got any voices that are easy to take the piss out of. I mean, it was a godsend for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in '78 when they first came on air, because I just sat around my lounge room doing. I said, Jimmy, do you guys know Richie sounded like this? Because we all knew Richie Benaud. Yeah. Blokes my age knew Richie Benaud as the sort of, former Australian skipper and a bit of a legend. Smooth X. We remember him for his Smooth X ads. Smooth X. But anyway, none of us had this idea, any idea that he spoke with this sort of weird voice, Fuck, did anyone know that Richie sounded like this? And so we're all sitting around the lounge room enjoying cricket again with the new repackaging.
Where were you living at this time of your life?
I was living, where were we? No, so it was the late 70s. I was the Northern Beaches.
Sydney?
I'm in Sydney. Yeah, Northern Beaches in Sydney, Australia. And then I ended up around the leafy North Shore of Sydney. So
Abbott country.
Yes. Is it Tony Abbott up around that way?
In County Abbott.
Yeah, I think Tony Abbott is on the cusp, I think you'll find, between the leafy North Shore and the Northern Beaches.
I suppose it'd be Smoke and Joe country then down there.
Smoke and Joe, but I was around Linfield, if anyone knows. Right. If anyone knows the leafy North Shore, I was in Linfield when
Dick Smith country.
Yes, when I started loving the game of cricket again.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of people, we were all sitting around, because it was on... Once Channel 9's presentation of the Packer version of cricket started, we're talking November, December, January, February, 4 months.
Yeah.
And large chunks of TV time were spent with Richie and Bill and Tony and Max and all these guys presenting cricket to us. So, we were loving the new presentation of the game and having a few beers. And then, if you have a penchant or a penchant, as Ray Warren would say, a penchant, for taking the piss out of voices like I did, you would just, listen to Richie. Well, he had marvellous effort. That, marvellous was the adjective du jour. Was his favourite, and super stuff. And then the fucking bottom lip had a mind of its own, and the chew, the way he said chew for 22, and you had to get your lips into the shape of a cat's ass to say it properly, chew for 22, and then, Bill Laurie, hey, go on, got him, yeah, Bill. And then all the guy did was just, fucking block the ball back down the pitch. Oh, super shot. And it wasn't a super shot, he just fucking blocked it back down the pitch. And Tony with the hard and fast and whatever, and they were just made,
Yeah.
Maxie Walker with that big old broken nose, and he had a big smile at his dog. So someone has... the schnoz, the old Maxophone. But it was just for someone who had a penchant for taking the piss out of voices. It was manna from heaven.
You working in radio? Or you just jumped straight into this world?
I'd done the two businesses that I had dabbled in from 1970 when I left school to 1980 was advertising in the music business. I used to work for EMI Music, and I'd spent a bit of time in a couple of advertising agencies. So that was my background, and I was thrown together with Ostentatious, and I wrote Australiana for him, and that was because just a couple of people that I was, social friends of mine, he said that he wanted to write some comedy or do some comedy, and I think they threw him my way because I was, quote, funny at parties, unquote. So that's when Austin and I got together. And
can
you give us some numbers on how that did? Because from memory, that was number one for...
Yeah. Well, it was a
live album. Well,
we did a live recording of it. Yeah. We did I wrote Australiana was just... I used, instead of saying there's a bear, a Clayton Catholic, and there's a Pope shit in the woods and all those sort of, I used to say, how much can a koala bear, and just, does a wombat, and it was just stupid fucking one-liners. And Sandy, who's Austin's real name, I gave him the name Ostentatious from Austin, Texas. I don't know why. Anyway, he used to throw those lines out on stage whenever he was whenever something didn't work,
Yep.
he'd say, "Oh fuck, how much in a koala bear?" And for some reason, he'd get the audience back again with a bit of a chuckle. So I ended up writing, the whole thing. I wrote down all of the ones that I had, and then I just wrote down all of the others that I could think of. Do you want a game of eucalyptus? Veggie might come too. Nulla bores me shitless.
Hey, that gag, that whole thing has aged pretty well too. You could have had some hot mid '80s kind of.
Yeah. Well, it went to number one, and then we were taken to court. Brash's was the name of a record outlet in Victoria, and the Victorian Vice Squad raided Brash's store. And charged them with 2 offences. One was selling an obscene item, which was all to do with the B-side of Australiana. It wasn't Australiana itself. They took them to court for selling an obscene item and keeping on their premises for the purpose of sale an obscene item. So Austin and I obviously thought this is a fucking golden opportunity for a bit of publicity, so we turned up to the court in Melbourne and listened to this cop playing the B-side of Australiana on a ghetto blaster, and the magistrate was fucking half asleep, and he obviously just couldn't give a fuck. It was just like, what am I wasting my time with this for? And the cop's trying to prove that this B-side, I can't even remember what the fucking sketch was or what the offensive line was, but anyway. And it was the day, because I remember getting dressed up for court, in a hotel in Melbourne, and it was the day anyone who sacks anyone for not turning up to work today is a bum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it was a momentous day that we won the America's Cup. Bob's there in the fucking stripy jacket telling everyone
He's back on the piss.
Back on the piss, and we won the America's Cup. Bob's telling any boss who sacks anyone's a bum. And then after that momentous event, we jumped a cab down to the Magistrates Court and listened to this cop playing Australiana. So this was a number one record, and it went from number one in every state and number one nationally to absolutely nowhere, because the record company decided that not one more copy would leave the warehouse as a result of the charges levelled against Brash's.
That's a bit soft.
So, softcock stuff, it was ridiculous. So, it's the only record to go number one twice, because as soon as the magistrate, whose final words were, like, I've heard everything here today. I don't know why we're here, actually, but I've heard everything today. I don't find any of these charges proven. I don't think it's an obscene item, and I'm going to lunch. And slams down the gavel. I'm going to lunch, as if we all needed to fucking know that. So anyway, it went out again, and it went to number one. So I think it has... The
got released twice.
Yeah, got released twice, basically. Yeah, and therefore is one of the few records. But at the time, it became the biggest selling Australian single of all time, knocking off my old mate Slim Dusty, who would have been very big around these parts in Batuta. And I got to work with Slim a lot when my job at EMI. I used to take Slim around to do his interviews, and got pretty close to him and Joy, his wife. He's a lovely guy.
Can you do a Slim?
No, Slim was just an Aussie voice. That's all.
Yeah.
Another one of those ones where it just sounds like everyone. Sounds like the bloke up the road, But Slim's Pub with No Beer had been the highest selling Australian single of all time.
Yep.
And we knocked him off with Australiana.
Right.
For which I had to apologise profusely to Slim.
So there's a guy that made a lot of cash on Pub with No Beer, the guy that had done the B-side. I don't think it was Stan Coster, it was some other bloke.
Yeah, well, Stan wrote a lot of Slim stuff. And Shorty Ranger.
Yeah.
Shorty Ranger wrote a lot of Slim stuff. I remember I had to take Slim out to This Is Your Life out at Channel 9. This was pre-Matt Munro days. Was it Mike Willesee, I think?
Yeah,
Mike Willesee might have been the host. Of course, it's had more incarnations, as you know. This Is Your Life. In fact, it's probably time to bring it back. You know how a program, they sort of run out of old enough people? When they start doing Leighton Hewitt, This Is Your Life, you're fucking, seriously.
You're getting married next week.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy's fucking 28 and they're doing This Is Your Life, so they've obviously run out of people. So I think what happens is they let a few people catch up, and then they'll bring it back again. Mike Munro who I had Bill Laurie calling Matt Munro constantly through the Bill Laurie This Is Your Life record back in 97 or whenever it was. But they'll bring that one back soon. And why am I talking about that? Oh, yeah, because I had to take Slim out to Channel 9 for the... and Shorty Ranger was there and Stan Costa and all the people you just mentioned. And Batuta would have been one of... I'm sure it would have been one of Slim's stop-offs.
Well, he sings about the Diamond Tuna a lot.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Well, if you had to appear on a show like that, who do you think would walk you out?
Walk me out? I don't know about. They never walked people out. The guy would do the big announcement.
Yeah.
And then they would. Just remind me here, boys. No, they'd catch up with you at something. And Mike Munro or Mike Willis would go springing out. He'd spring out from behind a curtain. So I'd be here, right, talking to you guys in Batuta or wherever, back in Sydney or fucking Brisbane, and the door would open, and there'd be a camera crew, and he'd be carrying the big book, and I'd be going, oh, what the fuck, and he'd be going, Billy Birmingham, this is your life. Oh my God, fuck. And look, I'm sure most of the people, there might have been the odd person who knew that it was going to happen. I remember John Farnham said to him, if I ever see Mike Munro with that fucking red book, I'm going to punch his lights out. I mean, Farnham had no interest whatsoever, and he knew that he was a top contender. Once he got into his 50s, he was like fucking, I could easily be a target here. And he said to Wheatley, you tell those fucking people they come anywhere fucking near me, they're going to get some footage for the ages. Mike Munro.
One thing, it's funny with your career, as you said, when they repackaged cricket. Channel 9 and Packer himself were looked at people living off the back of cricket, living off the back of the great game, the gentleman's game, and then furthermore, there's this other bloke living off the back of Channel 9 who are living off cricket. So, did you have any kind of interaction with Channel 9 at all, or you made
Channel 9 have shown. I would have to call it, because I've worked in the music business. Because I have taken, I worked at EMI in 75, so I had to PR and promote a lot of artists, whether it was McCartney when he was touring in Australia or any artists coming, could have been the Hollies, could have been fucking Susie Quattro, could have been, anyone who's coming out to Australia, and you've got to squire them around and take them to interviews. And then similarly, with our local artists, there was the day I joined was when Little River Band launched their first album. So I, had to take those guys around. AC/DC I had to take down to radio studios to do interviews and stuff. And I saw how the music business and the record business worked, and I saw how much promotion and publicity artists were given. If they're especially if they're having a level of success, it was a bit hard when you were trying to flog someone that it wasn't known. But once you had an established artist, people were clamouring to have interviews with them. What I've always found is that the 12th Man has been a bit of a hard, as in difficult, sell. It didn't matter about the level of success. So Channel 9's approval and support of me was not commensurate with the level of success that I was having.
It wasn't necessary.
Well, it wasn't necessary. It pissed me off, often when, it took me 30 years to be interviewed in the Channel 9, cricket telecast.
Yeah.
Which was I don't know, was it 10 or 15 years ago they started the cricket show, which came on in the middle of the cricket?
Yeah.
And I know my record companies have tried to get me onto various shows, because I'm not, most of my stuff's been word of mouth, so I've never actually sort of been a publicity hound. But obviously, to get the word of mouth going, you're not going to go and make a record and then clam up. You're going to go and do a few things. Yeah. So I've always been ready and willing to go and have a bit of a yarn, whether it's with bloody Our Current Affair or bloody Dickie Wilkins on the Today Show or whatever, just to get the word of mouth going, which has been my stock in trade. People talking to each other going, 12th Man's got another fucking record out, and next minute I'm, selling well. So Channel 9 have, I've been on a few things, but because I know how much support a successful act is usually getting, it always amazed me how difficult it was to get the sort of, coverage on Channel 9. Like, why on earth they wouldn't have me on the cricket 30 years. I mean, that's a fucking long time. I'd had 5, 6 number one albums, taking the piss out of their product. It was just too fucking weird. It's all very well to be having a chat with Dickie Wilkins on the bloody Today Show, but why wasn't I having a chat with Slats and Warney during the cricket show? And when I finally did, it was fucking magic, because it was a rain delay up at the Gabba, and it started hailing. I was, so here's a hail, it was like, it just went, I was supposed to do 1 5-minute bit, and then it started hailing in the middle of the Gabba, so they asked me to stay on. And I just had a really great...
You just gave it to them.
Mate, I just gave it to them. I had a great 20 minutes, 20 minutes of just, ripping the piss and having a bit of fun. And they were all those guys were big fans. It wasn't like they weren't having me on there. I don't know why they were so reluctant to. I think it might have been that they thought, they all read Richie the wrong way.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people think that Richie, didn't like what I was doing. What Richie had this objection to, and it was a fine line, was that he started to become what he thought was a mouthpiece for selling records for me. And he was very commercially aware, Richie. He hated a couple of people did some ads using a Richie Benaud voice, which was... 2 of us were pissed off.
Yeah.
Me, for one, because they were using my material.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they'd written a fresh script. It was all 2 for 22 and Marvellous. They were sort of ripping the 12th man off to sell Subaru motor cars or whatever. And Richie was pissed off because I don't like people using my voice for commercial purposes. So... I think that was the thing with Richie, and then it started once I'd got my level of success. Richie couldn't go anywhere without, they'd be asking him about his career and asking him about, the Channel 9 thing and all that. And they wouldn't let him go without saying, Richie, you can't go. Billy Birmingham, the 12th Man records, you could just hear him. You didn't have to hear it. You could see it in his face. Oh, for fuck's sake. I mean, can't I go anywhere without bloody having to talk about this prick? Even when he was flogging the autobiography, they would be asking him, Richie, before you go, Billy Birmingham's 12th Man stuff. Look, Billy's a clever guy. I remember him saying on one interview, Billy's a clever guy, and he's obviously very popular. People like what he does, but I don't like all of the swearing that he has on his recordings. I don't use that sort of language, nor do any of my fellow commentators. I mean, Ian Chappell had been thrown off Channel 9 3 times for swearing. He didn't realise the microphone was still on. He's going, what the fuck's going on here? And then the final one was when he said, Jesus fucking Christ. So he got everyone there blaspheming, and Kerry had to give him a mandatory 3 weeks off. And front page of the paper, I apologise, I didn't know the microphone was still turned on. But, but this thing of Richie, I don't use that sort of language, nor do any of my fellow commentators. And he also, the other sort of Glenn McGraw, the guy would hang the bat out to dry and it would almost take the outside edge, and McGraw would be glaring at the fucking batsman going, you fucking lucky, And Stevie Wonder could tell what he's just said. And Richie would think that was very funny. Yes, Richie, and he'd say, Glenn McGrath, just checking on the welfare of the batsman there. He'd make some sort of coy comment about what was just said. But so, and I know people who'd met him and said that on social occasions and in social settings, Richie was not averse to, chucking around. But it was just sort of a little bit sanctimonious. But I remember him saying, I don't use that sort of language, nor do any of my fellow commentators. And I took great exception to his recent record where he had my wife on it. Now, that sounded like, the way he put it, it sounded like I'd actually got his wife to come and, play her role in the studio. He meant to say where he took the piss out of my wife, but it sounded like I'd got Daphne down there and gave her a couple of cheeky Chardonnays and said, can you read this script for me, Daphne? So, but I think a lot of it was Channel 9...
They were protecting Richie.
They were protecting Richie. And they weren't... It wasn't like Richie was... he saw... He was an old bloody journalist, He comes from he knew that the success of the 12th Man was having not a negative effect or negative impact on Channel 9's coverage or its commentators.
It was having a positive effect on
It was having a totally positive effect. No, but I mean, sure, but he didn't begrudge me making a quid out of it, but he was also smart enough to realise that, 7 number 1 albums in a row it's having a positive knock-on effect for Channel 9's coverage and indeed the commentators. Tony Gregg used to say, he put an extra fucking zero on my often in the speaking fee, Tony lapped it up. He was a big 12th Man fan, and he said, look, as far as commercial things are concerned, I don't give a rat's ass what you do, as long as I'm in the budget. That's very South African of you, Tony. I'll make sure we set aside a few grand for you.
A couple of rand.
Yeah, a couple of rand. But Tony was a big fan and saw the commercial pluses.
How is it to meet these people that you impersonate?
Richie, I only met him twice.
Yep.
And I was glad I did. But the first time I met him was after doing the 12th Man for 16 years. And a lot of people were just blown away. Like, during the 16 years from when I started in Australia, after about, the second or third album, people would ask, in doing an interview for a new release, have you met Richie Benaud? And I was absolutely stunned that I hadn't. And that all comes into the whole sort of, Channel 9 and how much of an at arm's length they wanted to have me. And I'd spoken to Richie, though, on the phone. I remember in the very first record, because he thought it was a one-off. So I think he gave more than tacit approval in the early days because he thought, it's a one-off. I better be seen as being a good sport. But once I came out with record number 2, he realised, for fuck's sake, this could be a bit of a series here. And so I rang him up and I told him, and I sent him the platinum record. I had a platinum record piss-up for all of the guys, and they all turned up. Darryl Eastlake and Jack Gibson and Chappelli and Mike Gibson and a lot of the guys from whom I'd extracted the piss turned up for this
party,
cheese and bickies, bees and chickies, and hand out a few platinum records. And Richie couldn't make it, so I sent him the platinum record, and he rang me and said, thanks very much, and I've got it taking pride of place in the office. I think it was as I did the second and the third album, he decided that it was just fueling the fire for the reasons I enunciated earlier about, I just get sick of it's almost like I'm a mouthpiece for flogging this fella's records, I don't like commercial endorsements and that sort of thing. People couldn't believe in the first 15 years, and I was up to about album number 3 or 4 or whatever, and I hadn't met him, and they all thought that was odd. In 1999, I did a double album compilation for the English market for the World Cup, which was being held over in the UK. And Scotland were in the World Cup for the first time. I offered them £25,000 to have my name emblazoned across their jerseys because they had no sponsor, and got a fabulous letter back from the Scottish Cricket Union saying no.
That would have been good.
Oh, mate, of course it would have. And they said, no, it's a new game here. We're trying to introduce it to young people and we don't think this is the right way to do it. I said, fucking hell, it's the perfect way to do it. I had a lot of fans over there, bootleg fans in the UK. In fact, I think my bootleg audience in 1999 was more than the 300,000 commercial fans that I had in Australia, because it was 62 million people over there, and cricket was the second language, and people would come out to Australia, or schoolboy cricket teams would come out, and the Aussies would introduce them to the 12th Man, and they'd take it back, and it was just bootlegs everywhere. Everywhere I fucking went, people would pull out the shitty old TDK cassette with 12th Man on it, one journo told me gleefully that he'd sat up one night on a double cassette player making hundreds of copies for his mates. Oh, thanks for that. Where's my invoice book? So I had a big, a bootleg following over there. But anyway, day one, jet-lagged, bit nervous, at the Oval for the first game. England versus South Africa at the Oval, and I'm doing my first interview, and it was the biggest interview actually of the whole 3-week tour. Jonathan Agnew on the BBC, and I'm just sitting there next to him, right behind Alan Donald, fucking steaming in to bowl to whoever it was. Literally right with this beautiful old broadcast area with the sliding glass windows, and I'm right behind the bowler's arm, sitting there having a chat with Jonathan Agnew. Anyway, while I was waiting to do this interview in this little ante-room, there was everyone, Buddy Botham and Viv Richards and Jeffrey Boycott and everyone. And then all of a sudden I just heard, Well, that sounds good, love. Yes. Okay, well, I'll look forward to seeing you at about 7. And I'm thinking, is that someone doing me? Or is that the real Richie Benaud? I couldn't see him. He was behind a fucking pot plant. Anyway, he emerged from behind the pot plant and I jumped in front of him thinking... Because the PR guy said, "Oh, there he is. You're going to go say good day to him." I said, "I never met him." And you never met him? Yeah, you fucking put your kids through school. 16 years, you never met him. I said, "No." And so I just jumped in front of him and I said, "Richie, you can't put this off forever, mate. It's Billy Birmingham. How you going?" And he was just, "Oh, Billy, what a strange place to be seeing you." And I've often told this story on TV and I do the reenactment of it because he was kind of moonwalking away from me. The whole conversation was done on the move. And it was like, "Oh, Billy, what a strange place to be meeting you." And I'm not going to stop for a chat. And then he said something strange about, yes, I think we were supposed to meet on a golf course sometime in the past. I had no idea what he's talking about. And I said, "Oh, really? Oh, shit, I'd love to have a game with you one day, Rich." "Well, I'd have to improve out of sight before I took you on from what I hear." And I still don't know what the fuck he was talking about. So I'm just sort of going along with it. But the whole time it's the moonwalk away from me. Anyway, so I met him. Yeah. And therefore had a lovely anecdote for the rest of my 3-week tour because everyone from Edinburgh down to London and through Leeds and Manchester and whatever all asked me, "Have you met Richie Benaud?" And I said, "Well, funny you should ask." Just the other day. But thankfully I caught up with him again about a month before he died, and that was great because by then he had let his guard down. He wasn't on, and he was insisting on having a photograph with me and whatever. So Richie's sort of true attitude, if you like, to the 12th man was like he wasn't still part of the Channel 9, he wasn't still captain of the commentary team from the CCP, Central Commentary Position. And he was happy to see me and I was happy to see him. He was very unwell. I put my arm around him for a photo and I couldn't believe just how wasted away he was. But that was for the meat and livestock board ad, the lamb ad, which was he was having a barbie at his place, and everyone was invited except me. I rang him up and said, "Richie, apparently there's a bit of a do on at your place." There's this lovely pause from Richie, and he says, "Nope," and hangs up on me. But that was nice to be able to, sort of go full circle like that, to catch up with him after all those years.
From the moonwalk to the
exactly.
To a photo.
Yeah, exactly. And he's saying, "Oh, look, we could have a photo taken together," and it was just nice to have that sort of cherished piece of memorabilia of me and Richie, literally a month. Because, it's a weird way to make a fucking living. And let's face it, Richie's been there, as I said earlier, he's been part of everything that I've done. And he's where I started. It was his voice that attracted me to trying to get a laugh while we're watching this new presentation of cricket, which we're all enjoying. But it was Richie's voice that I started doing, and then all my mates started doing it. I just happened to do it sort of, better than anyone else in the room. And after Australiana was a success in 83...
You're the ball rolling.
Yeah, I sort of thought, well, fuck, I did that for Sandy. What... people were going, "Oh, what are you going to do?" Follow it up. And by then, I was ostentatious as writer, manager, producer, driver, bum wiper. I was bloody, everything. And I just... I wasn't cut out for doing that, so he and I sort of, parted company, but people were saying, you're going to try and follow it up with anything, and I thought, well, I should, because I was stoked that I'd written something that was so well received by the Aussie public. And so just a bit of an epiphany driving around one day, and I thought, what about, this was 84, I thought, well, I've been sitting around the lounge room doing Richie and Tony and Bill and all those guys' voices as we watched the cricket, and it was certainly universally popular at that stage. Everyone, Channel 9's coverage was a massive ratings winner, as was their Wide World of Sports back before. Wide World of Sports was a big show then because there was no Fox Sports and whatever where you're seeing the games live. It was all magazine-style show. Went for 5 hours or something. You could go to Perth and come back and the thing's still going, And, so I thought, well, maybe I can get something out of that. So, and I knew it that well. I didn't need to have tapes of the show in front of me. I went out to the same backyard where I wrote Australiana, and I sat down with the blank sheet of paper and the HB pencil, which are my tools of choice, and I could just see Richie welcoming us back after the luncheon adjournment, which is now filled by the cricket show, but back then it was episodes of Gomer Pyle or some fucking thing, you know, and I could just hear him say, you know, the music, bum 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 bum. Welcome back to the MCG and welcome to our Melbourne viewers for the first time today. Marvellous day for cricket here today, and I'd always wanted to have, when I started thinking about doing, I always wanted to have commentators swearing like troopers and having it sound the most natural part of their... You know, try not attract any attention to it, but just make out that saying, fuck me, if they didn't just disappear quicker than you could say, gee, it was going to piss down. And it's just, I don't know, it's just something naughty schoolboy in me that wanted to have these guys all swearing like troopers and making it sound like it was just an absolutely normal part of the commentary.
But you picked the format because that's what everyone else wanted to hear too.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. People used to say to me, like, when you have Richie saying, yeah, fuck me if they didn't, it's like you listen to it and you think that's what they'd like to be saying if they weren't on telly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was coming from. He's like, you know... you're like having a footy commentator. Oh, fuck, he's dropped it. Oh, you know, what an idiot. You know, like, that's what a commentator would like to say in the middle of a call.
He has absolutely shit the bed.
Fuck that. That was a try for all money, you know.
That's one thing we want to ask. You've given everyone a taste of Ray Warren.
Oh!
Would you consider that?
Made him... And Ray agrees with me on this because, you know, he can't walk down the fucking street now without getting what I call the Benaud treatment. Hey, Rabs! Oh! Crunching tackle. I'm everywhere I fucking go, Birmingham. I'm getting these people yelling out at me because, you know, that's what used to happen to Tony Gregg. And Tony used to tell me, like, you know, he's walking with Richie in the concourse at Brisbane Airport and, you know, they say, marvellous effort that, and blow it out your arse, Tony. And they used to get all these 12th manisms hurled at them. And Rabs started to get the same thing. And I've made him... I called him the second most impersonated man in the country, and now that Richie's left these parts, dead set, I think Rabs would have to be one of the most impersonated. Great voice.
Yeah.
Dead set in the fair dinkum department. DS in the FDD. One of the best voices. Great commentator. Good bloke. No substitute for
Do you reckon you could do a...
Well, people have said,
session?
why don't you do a rugby league one? And I say, well, it's not a national sport, you know. A lot of the success of the 12th man came from the fact that cricket was our national game.
Yeah.
But we got, you know, the southern states are just rabid fucking AFL, you know, left foot snap. But it's not, rugby league's not a national sport. And when it comes to sitting down and making a record, so far, I've always been drawn to doing something that has a national audience rather than making a record where you know that there's a good chance that in Adelaide it's going to go down like a bucket of sick because they don't know, you know. Rabs I did on my records once he started doing the swimming, you might remember, the pan packs, which I always thought sounded like a feminine hygiene product. Darling, do you need some pan packs? I'm just off to the chemist. He started doing the pan packs. Oh, Susie O'Neill, Madam Butterfly. And so it gave Rabs national exposure. So I then felt a bit better about doing Rabs on my records. I didn't have him doing the swimming. I had him bursting into swimming in the middle of... It was somewhere in the middle of the cricket. He dropped into Thorpe, Hackett and Thorpe. Right in the middle of the sentence, he said, "A big strapping young lad." I think it was Boucher, a big strapping young fellow, very much in the mould of Thorpe, Hackett and Thorpe. They won't catch him, and then just goes back to his normal commentary. Once Rabs grabbed himself a bit of a national audience through the pan packs.
You gave him a rugby league. Was that the Wide World of Sports one you gave him?
I can never remember. The first time I did the State of Origin was with Darryl Eastlake and Jack Gibson. So that was 87. And that's when Darryl Eastlake was, you know, oh, by gee, you know, and everything was huge. Daryl said to me, mate, I had no idea. I said, huge so much until you told me. See, now I can't go anywhere without people yelling at me, oh, Daryl, you're a huge fuckwit. So, yeah, Daryl Eastlake and Jack Gibson and Mike.
The Islander names when we yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, that's right. Eventually I had Rabs doing a bit of State of Origin in Wide World of Sports 2, and then on subsequent record, I had him giving the updates on the Kiwi Rugby League team to Ken Sutcliffe, wasn't it? Ken, look, I've just had an update on some of the changes to this New Zealand side, and I thought I might give you a bit of a heads up for the bulletin this afternoon. Yeah. It was the one-sided conversation.
Yeah.
And, okay, the hooker is varicose venicola. And the props, will he tell Lou a lie, and he'll only ever lie to Lou. And then I've basically done a new team every year. Now you got, lent him a mower. Why won't he return it to me? And rustled up some tucker.
Who's the one you could have tongue twister?
Oh, Stacey Jones. Oh, fuck, some of these names. They're tongue twisters.
Stacey Jones.
Let him have another pie. Will he lose a kilo or two? Will he slip her a tonguey? He don't even know her. Bent her over. They're great. Just in the same mould as I've had a lot of fun with. The Pakistani, Indian and Sri Lankan names, which of course these days are Muslim names, and if I was to invent the 12th man now, I would be hung, drawn and quartered, and the records would never see the light of day, because every fucking PC brigade, well, you can't fucking do that. Thankfully, when I started, they were Sri Lankan cricketers' names and Pakistani cricketers' names and Indian cricketers' names.
Yeah.
But Kathy McCabe from The Telegraph said to me a couple of years ago, do you reckon you could give birth to a 12th man now? And I sort of thought about it for the first time, and I thought, well, what she's saying there is, if you just came out and started doing all these,
well, that's what
silly names. I mean, people would be going, oh, that's fucking, Well, of course, nothing I said was ever saying anything about race, creed, or culture. There was nothing any fucking anti-Muslim about it. It was just
doing Australian ears. Australian ears. But
it was wordplay. It was if you've got Mahendra Amanaf and Sunil Gavaskar became Cuddy's Amanaf and Sunil Gavaskar. I mean, it was just mucking around. They happened to be the two openers for India.
Yeah, but that's what we were saying earlier with ostentatious. That particular bit, I think that's aged so well that you couldn't even be called out on anything in there.
No, there was nothing again. There was nothing in that. That's absolutely pure wordplay.
But it could have been anything in that.
Mind you, the dope section where, well, Bill said he'd like a smoke. No one knew where the dope was stashed. I said, I think Marino's, but I was just spinning a bit of a yarn. Oh, sorry, boys, knocking the studio down. And then Alice springs into action and starts to pack Billabong. That section I had to edit out of the film clip, so we ended up having the censored version and uncensored. Right. So Countdown wouldn't play. Countdown never played it anyway, but I'm saying anyone who was going to play the clip, and there were very few people who did, but a couple of people played the clip and they played the censored version where there was a nice edit point, thankfully, where any reference to marijuana and packing Billabong and the Tally-Ho Bart and all that sort of shit.
They kept Platypus in there.
They kept Platypus and probably seen a cockatoo, and they kept that out. They kept all that in there.
Yeah.
So, look, it's harder to pick than a broken nose what people are going to censor and what they're not.
Yeah, it's all aged a little bit better than the likes of Rodney Roode and Kevin Wilson. That stuff that they did, they probably couldn't give birth to.
Well, a lot of people, the Telegraph did an article recently. You guys might have seen it. The Daily Telegraph in Sydney did a thing about is PC comedy. And I said, look, you're going to have to speak to the guys who do it for a live comedy for a living. I said, I make records. And, one thing I will say is that if I was to do a 12th man, if I was to launch a 12th man character now, the people would take umbrage, absolutely for no reason whatsoever, but they just would, about the fun I have with the Pakistani, Indian and Sri Lankan names, which is just pure, unadulterated wordplay, nothing else at all. Nothing at all about race, creed or culture. Never has been, never will be.
Just like Mal Meninga, smell my finger.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just taking the piss.
Yeah.
And... But all the other guys that were in there was Rodney Rude, Kevin Bloody Wilson, Ostentatious, Vince Sorrenti. Those guys all do live comedy for a living.
Yep.
It's unfortunate because to a large extent, the stuff that people, the PC brigade, are getting upset about, to me is just... So there's no comedy that offends me at all. The stuff that I just find tasteless and unfunny, and that's just my opinion. It's a very subjective thing, but no one's really ever going to do anything that offends me. But I am going to think that is fucking tasteless, and what's worse is it's unfunny. No, it's a different world now.
I reckon you'd still get away with it. Everything you've done, I reckon you'd still get away with it. Kevin Bloody Wilson and that lot, they would. Oh no, they would struggle.
They would struggle. They were, some of those songs that Kevin wrote were pretty bloody out there, and Rodney, but they were very popular too. Those, they sold a lot of records. Those guys.
I think they're still making a bit of money too.
Yeah, well, Rodney he gave it away for a while, and then came back out and did another tour.
The Vengeance. Sam Pang was saying, a comedian was saying, he was a guy in Sydney, grew up watching him. He said, I have to go see it just to, just for that moment in my life. He went there and he said, Rodney ends the show, wheels out the merch trolley, sits there and signs everything.
That's right.
Walks up and his brother-in-law was saying, this is Sam, been a lifelong fan, you're a legend, he needs to get an autograph. And he wrote, Dear Sam, fucking bum me. he goes, the man's a genius. He goes, that is so funny.
Oh, man. Listen, Rodney is, I know. But his wife used to make the cock hats for him. He'd come out with a hat with big balls and cock and Pat, his wife. So we were there. Like when Rodney, he launched the Comedy Store and Ostentatious did the bloody audition back in 80. Vince Sorrenti was a waiter and he wanted to be a comedian, and occasionally Rodney would let him take off the apron and jump up, and Vince used to do stuff mainly based on TV ads, taking the piss out of K-Tel stuff and whatever, but that's the very early days when the Jamison Street Comedy Store, to me it was the birth of stand-up comedy, because Melbourne, which was comedy capital of Australia, was all theatre review, university review type humour, but the actual hardcore man and microphone,
they weren't doing it.
No one was doing that. Stand-up comedy was a bloke doing a prawn morning at the Illawarra Workers Club or something, but to the bulk of Australia, the comedy strip, Comedy Store, Robin Williams and all those guys, we didn't have that, and that's what Rodney brought to the Jamison Street Comedy Store was, legitimate, funny thing happened on the way to the man and microphone, stream of consciousness, and a lot of the Melbourne guys who wanted to do that started coming up to Sydney to have a crack.
Right.
And then that's when, as I said, Ostentatious did an audition, and he became a regular down at the Comedy Store. But it's I haven't been to a comedy room for ages. Have you guys been? Have they got a Batuta Comedy Store?
We did have one, but it burnt down.
Right.
At the it was overinsured, so we.
Yeah, I understand.
Irish stock take. Just before we wrap up, tell us the budget. Tell us the studio. Tell us how you recorded that first album.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in here because Batuta have just refitted, I suppose you'd call it.
Koala Sofa Studios, if you will.
Yeah, that's right. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bit of simpatico there because Koala being a mattress supplier. What you guys have done here is a little bit more upmarket than I'm used to.
Right.
The 12th Man's records have always been made in what I call a homemade studio. And I mean by homemade, I mean 3 mattresses jammed up into the corner of a room. That gives me the sort of, the soundproofing, the booth. Throw a doona over the top to give it a ceiling. And lifting up the doona cover and hopping inside it is going into the studio. And every single one of my records has been made in that sort of, cottage industry, low budget fashion.
Light in there?
Yes, I'd run a bed lamp in between the few mattresses. I'd have like a bedside lamp. The scripts were gaffer taped to the mattress in front of me. So that I could read the script when I was recording. So it was as homemade as you can possibly get.
Low input, Large.
Low, very low. The John Wilkes booth, I used to call it whenever I'd make it, the John Wilkes booth, and served me very well, boys, because everything that I was doing was just voice recording.
Yeah.
And I used to love doing all the Foley work, as they call it, which is the sound effect stuff. Like, when I had Mr. and Mrs. Benaud rooting, I was lying on the floor. I had three microphones aiming down at me, and I'm lying on the floor with a doona over me, and I've got the headphones on. Yeah. So I'm listening to Richie going, and so I had the 8-second root, and what I had to do was to fluff the doona in time with the thrusts, if you like.
Right.
And I always loved doing that stuff, or the poker game that Kerry Packer was having, and I had all the chips and stuff. So that's all done with Froggy, my engineer, playing back the audio to me, and I would have to throw the poker chips in, or ruffle the doona, or Richie having the longest piss in the history of the world, while he's talking to his wife, I've got a long day ahead of me, and you hear him off, a bit of reverb, so he's in the next room, and he's and the piss just went for 2.5 minutes. And I love doing all. That's one of my favourite things. Usually because it means I've done my bit, I've finished my script, and I've finished my.
You're on the home stretch.
I'm on the home stretch, and then all I have to do is just now make it come to life with crowds and bat hitting ball and poker chips, or having a piss, or having a root, as it might.
Well, just before we say goodbye, Billy, it's been 12 years since Boned was released.
Is it? Yeah, shit, you're right, 2006.
So is there any plans for the future?
The only thing I can say to you and all the people in the Diamond Tina, and in fact all around Australia, because I know the show has very much a national flavour, national audience, national appeal. All I can say to people out there is never say never, and especially now that the cricket has found a new home, or indeed semi-detached home. On one side is Channel 7, and on the other side of the semi is Fox Sports. So what do we know about Fox? We know that it's Gilly, whose voice is about as interesting as a broken arm.
And Mark Waugh.
And Mark Waugh, who's similarly exciting. And then on the other side, who have Channel 7 announced? Slater and Ponting.
And Damien Fleming.
There you go.
Yeah.
They are three of the most nondescript voices. So I don't want to get I don't want to get 12th Man fans' hopes built up. Yeah. But I suppose what I can do is give Channel 7 a go, give them a go, give Fox Sports a go, and if there are any voices or comedy idiosyncrasies that are worth extracting the odd litre of piss, then I might have a crack at doing one. But I don't think so. I think I have had such a great run with the 12th Man. I have had a fan base like no other artist has, because I don't appear live, because I've never done film clips and whatever. The organic affection that people have had for the 12th Man, a lot of people have literally, and they tell me this, grown up with me. Mm-hmm. And I always say to them, I think you mean not grown up with me. And they go, yeah, I know what you mean. Schoolboy humour is alive and well. But a lot of people, they were in their late teens when I started in 84, and they're now middle-aged, got a couple of kids, and the 12th Man has been a part of their life. Every time I did a record, they'd go and buy one. People have come up to me, honestly, with tears in their eyes, saying, the only connection I had with my father and grandfather was listening to your records down the back shed on Christmas Day. Apart from that, we didn't fucking talk all year. But we would disappear from the women folk and the kiddies and go down the back shed and listen to 12th Man records. And I've had people tearing up. So I always describe it as a very organic affection that people have had. And that's been having worked in the entertainment business and seeing that sort of reaction from people, it's a nice thing, and the most enjoyable thing about the whole 12th Man story, really.
Well, never say never.
Never say never. No, never say never, but don't hold your breath.
Thanks for joining us, Billy.
Thanks for joining us, Billy.
Thanks very much. And what do we call ourselves? Desert
Rock FM 96.5.
Desert Rock FM, like Richie Benaud here, and even though I'm dead, we'll come back here to Desert Rock FM in just a few moments.
And that was the late Richie Benaud from heaven. Richie, if you're listening, hope you're comfortable. How was that? Until next week, I guess. You know, I hope all of you enjoyed listening to us laugh for
Giggle like school children
for about an hour or two. But until next week, my name is Errol Parker. Never talk to the police without a lawyer, and stay out of the pokies.
I'm Clancy Overall. You be kind to each other.